This is the Campus Alliance for Sustainability and the Environment for a few new folks I think we have. So it's really good to have you. We meet monthly. And if you ever want to talk more about getting involved with sustainability on campus, feel free to reach out to us here. We also have a website. If somebody has that link handy and wants to drop it, I'm looking at Lily. That would be great. If not, I'll find it and we can share it in a little bit, which is where we share the recordings for our meetings. So that's essentially it. Oh, Gabriela, you have an announcement. I'll let you give an announcement and then we can sort of go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, since I don't know, it feels a little bit in line. I was trying to get a good link. The best I have is this Facebook post. But if you know any artists, we have a call for art for this show that we're having. It's called Building Community, Building Power, Art as Resistance. And so different community organizations are going to have a wall of the gallery. And so we're going to be curating sort of like, what does this mean for each of us? And so I don't know, I know that like y'all are probably connected to some pretty dope artists, especially those that would like to focus on you know, anything related to like the environment or environmental justice, or just in general building community and building power. So if y'all would like to share, that would be great. I don't know if this link will work, but there's the link for submissions on there and a little like flyer that you can share.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, and that's on the Facebook page for the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition. So if that link doesn't work, that's another way probably to find it then, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. All right, well, this kind of leads into, well, our guest speakers. And we're really grateful to have two wonderful speakers talking about how can we all get involved, what can students do, anyone really do to try to influence things, because we can change the world, we can change our county, we can change our communities. So we have two guest speakers. One is Gabriela Alcazar. She works with the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition, the MEJC, which is the organization I just mentioned before. She's a network manager there, and she has worked in Chicago with the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization on environmental justice issues and air quality. She's also done work with the Clean Air Council in Detroit and has experience in early education in Southwest Detroit, and done work around community building, power building, and those types of things. And so we're really glad to have her as somebody who's doing environmental justice work here locally, but also has a lot of expertise on how we can change the world. And then we have Charlie Cavell, who is a commissioner for Oakland County. And he is a representative of the 18th district that includes Ferndale, Hazel Park, Huntington Woods, Royal Oak Township, and parts of Oak Park. Those municipalities or cities. He is a social worker. He's also a union member, has been involved and is a member of the Sierra Club and the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. So great to have somebody who's involved in those local organizations and other community organizations, but those two that do environmental related work. And his role as commissioner started in the beginning of 2021. And he's worked on a number of different initiatives, including housing security. And just kind of looking forward to hearing about his perspective as well at the county that we at the university sit in. So thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start off, have a couple of things to start off with both of them sharing about kind of their backgrounds. And then have some questions I'll ask. But if you have something you want to specifically ask, feel free to throw that in the chat. And then we'll make sure that we do that. We'll leave time at the end, so that way it's kind of a free-for-all, just open discussion. So I have some things to guide us, but this is really kind of an informal time to just learn about how do we actually get involved and what are the ways we can do that in meaningful ways. So first, just kind of starting off, I'm kind of curious for both of you, so Gabriela and Charlie, if you can just tell us about kind of how you got to where you are in your current positions. Why did you do what you're doing now? And like, where do you see kind of this importance of engaging in kind of local or kind of general politics, elected officials and such? So Gabriela, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and then I'll go to Charlie.
Thank you for that. I just want to thank you all for your patience with me. If there's anything that you can't understand, please feel free to ask me to repeat myself. I'm off camera today because I had a dental procedure last week. So I know sometimes it can be a little hard to hear me, and I definitely don't want y'all seeing me without my my front tooth. But yeah, so I'm Gabriela Alcazar. Go by Gabi. Either is fine, Gabriela or Gabi. For today, I currently working at MEJC, but I've been a part of the organization for a few years. I think more intensely since 2018. You know, here and there supporting just because I was a part of the community. I had a lot of friends who were doing a lot of the convening work since it started back in 2001. But it's been a great place for me to land. Because it's sort of an intersection of a lot of the different work that I've been a part of. So a little bit about my background. I was born in Chicago and I lived there for the first 10 years of my life, moved to Michigan when I was around 10, but always had kind of a connection back home. I'm a daughter of immigrants. My parents are from Jalisco, Mexico. And so I think I was sort of thrown into advocacy and just sort of organizing just by virtue of being a member of a family that was in, you know, a new place, a new country. My parents didn't speak English growing up, so I ended up sort of being thrown into a lot of adult spaces as a translator, very, very young. You know, having to navigate, mostly it was at like doctor's offices. So when like an aunt or a cousin or somebody needed to like go to the doctor, you know, I'd be like there translating. But sometimes it was in places like at the Rosa Parks federal building for an immigration hearing for somebody, you know, and obviously that started happening when I was a little bit older and more articulate. But I always like noticed like, oh wow, the people that come with the lawyers are getting much better treatment, it seems like, or they're being heard more. And so I was very young and sort of like noticing a lot of what it means to sort of interact, I think, with these type of spaces and systems. And so I wanted to be a lawyer, right? So I was like, oh, like, I don't, you know, I'm career days, like, what do you want to do? Like, I want to be a lawyer like these people. I want to be an immigration attorney specifically. Thankfully I went to Michigan State and found out that I don't have to be a lawyer to advocate for anyone in this world. I got in touch with the Chicano Latino Studies program there, which is very active in a lot of different things. On campus, off campus, and so I was able to really learn a lot about community organizing, about activism, how to you know, put these theories into practice that were about really about building community, right? And so I think I was saying that being at MEJC really is like a conflation and of all of those things, because of the intersectionality of what EJ means, I think, to me. You know, we're a coalition at our organization. So we're actually kind of a table of different partners. We do also have individual members, and especially this year, we are expanding our membership drive to have individual partners. But really the heart of our organization is a lot of these other sort of like smaller local groups and organizations, some block clubs who are doing work around environmental justice. And for those of you who maybe don't know what that means, I keep saying that I realize that not everybody totally understands, but I'm not going to give you like a textbook definition, but you know, pollution and pollution generally and industry has disproportionately impacted people of color in this country. And so Why we say environmental justice and why that is like the center is because if we are to move into a just transition, if we are to fight climate change, like that needs to be central to any solutions. Is centering folks who have already been the most affected by some of the destructive and extractive policies of capitalism and where we're going in terms of climate change. So I don't want to talk too long. I will share more. I know y'all are going to have questions, whether it's about my background, the organization, but that's a little bit about myself and a little bit about MHAC, and I will pass it on to Charlie.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, you don't hear? Okay,
Yep.
great. I'm at some country club for some meeting thing, so someone from behind there comes and kicks me out. But hi everybody. First, Mashkan, thank you for inviting me and letting me in on this group. This is super cool. I was eavesdropping before it was our turn to talk, and you guys are doing great stuff. So like, keep kicking butt. You wanted the background a little bit, and then okay. So so my background, the reason why I chose to run for office, kind of to an extent, like what Gabby said. I think both Gabby and I come from the same sort of world. It sounds like talking about movement organizing and community building, and doing one-on-ones and all that sort of thing. So my story of self and the beginning of my time going up the ladder of engagement in terms of like movement building comes from the fact that when I was 10, I was being raised by my dad, who's a single parent, and he got arrested. So then I spent a few nights in foster care. Then I lived with my grandparents. Then I went back with my dad, and he got out of jail. And then, anyways, eventually, when I was 16, I got adopted by a different family. But that experience helped me realize, and I think this is something everyone kind of goes through in their life if they're lucky enough to see what it's like to be disenfranchised or voiceless or not empowered. So then you kind of, that's right, because empathy is a learned trait, right? It's not something you're born with, right? You could be born with kindness, intelligence, and all that sort of stuff, but you're not born with empathy. You have to learn it. So I learned about empathy when I was 10, and ever since then, it's been this kind of journey of trying to figure out why things are structurally not just. So when I was 10, up until being 22, I wanted to be a social worker because the social workers I had had in child protective services I thought were bad. Then when I became a social worker, I realized it wasn't the social workers, it was the policies that they had to work within. So then I wanted to learn how to make policy. And then, from 22-ish to 28-ish, it was okay. These are the ways to make policy working in different fields. And now as a 31-year-old, I realized somewhere around 26, 27, 28. Oh, it doesn't matter what the policymakers or the people doing the research or the people trying to make the information make sense of how to affect policy change are saying, is the people that are making the decisions are not policymakers, it's politicians. So how do you become a politician? So then I started working on political campaigns, started working with politicians, realized, oh, I could be a better one of those than these people. And so far, I don't think I've sold out too much, but it's only been, like was mentioned, like a year and a half. So we'll see what happens. But so that's the kind of quick bio, but also to pick up what Gabby was saying, all of this intersects, right? Gabby was talking about lived experience with immigration and having to be like in grown-up spaces a lot younger than would be expected. So there's intersectionality here, right? It's not just about immigration or racial, social, or economic justice. Environmental justice is a part of all of those forms of justice. So what I've had to learn because it's been inorganic, the way I learned about organizing and building power is that it isn't just one thing, right? It isn't like in Oakland County, childcare for middle-class families is the thing that'll fix it all. There is no one fix, right? It's all of the things that are broken need to all be fixed together, right? It needs to be union workers that build cars that use gas that need to work together with climate activists to figure out how we can have this alliance to then work together in an intersectional way to help workers and our environment, right? That there needs to be this bond built. If for no other reason, then it's easier for politicians to understand because we're not good at reading. So, is that enough chatting? Big
Yeah.
questions and stuff? Okay.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, and really that leads well into kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about is to hear your both of your perspectives on, you know, what's the value of doing this kind of work, like engaging with elected officials? How do you, like, what's the approach of how do you start doing this work? How do you start figuring out, like, how do I look to, are there town halls and meeting with representatives, there's writing and giving public comments, like, how do you try to navigate that kind of question of like, what am I supposed to do to start off when you've never done this type of stuff before? Any advice you have? Charlie might be having a moment. So Gabriela, if you have anything, and I'll say, you know, kind of related to that is the, like, what's the work that can be done outside of just like attending a public meeting? But there's organizations like the MEJC that do really great work. So what's the ways that people can think about, like, where do I start if you've never done this before?
Yeah, I can, if Charlie's out, or I'm not sure what's happening, but I personally, my personal politics are that we need a diversity of tactics, right? I mean, Charlie was talking a little bit more specifically about engaging in sort of like the political process with elected officials, and MEJC is definitely very stooped in that kind of work. But I think we need everything, right? We need to be doing, you know, going to the town halls, engaging our legislators, whether they're local, state, or federal, on our policies that we need, the systems change, right, that we need. But we also, you know, we need to, I think this maybe goes for me to the point of like the difference between like organizing and activism, right? I think a lot of people in organizing spaces or in movement work tend to favor, you know, one or the other as like a more primary way, but they're both, you know, we need to go out on the street and have rallies and have our signs, and we also need to go into the town halls, and we need to go knock on the doors of Charlie and all the other legislators making these policies and having meetings, right? So I don't know how to answer that question without saying that, like, there is work to be done at so many different levels of this like behemoth of of a monster that we call, like, you know, the American democratic experiment, and so really it depends on your interests, it depends on your skills, but at the end of the day, yeah, like figuring out if there's anybody in your area already doing any of the work that you're interested in, if there's already groups that you can get involved with, I think is the best way. A lot of times we try to recreate the wheel when like there's already, like, you know, a bunch of struggling smaller groups that just need support and we need to like get behind, or if there isn't, you know, do it, like build it, get the people together on your block, on your street, in your dorm room, wherever. And like, so I think, I don't know if this is a great answer, but I think there's a lot of different ways, to go about it. And I think most are valid and useful, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about changing, you know, the minds of legislators and getting them to pass the laws that we want. It's also about changing the minds of our neighbors and like getting them to understand sometimes, you know, what the connections are that we've maybe, like, you know, figured out through whatever, right? But like getting everyone else to also be on the same page. And so education is also super important. So I think there's a place and a role for everybody in this movement. Whether, like I said, you're going to be the person out there on the street with your sign yelling at DTE for increasing people's, you know, bills, or you're going to be the person in a suit, you know, at Charlie's office next week. Like there's a role for everybody, and it's just a matter of, putting your boots on, getting to work. There's so much work to do. But that's my answer to your question.
I'm gonna quickly jump in here. I love that you guys are both kind of giving similar, like, it's a similar idea of like all the things matter. So I appreciate that. And that you're answering the question. Rhea has a question related to something you mentioned, Gabby. So I'm gonna turn to her.
Yeah, thank you so much. First, I just want to say, like, Charlie and Gabriela, thank you so much for like the work that you are doing. And like Gabriela said, there is a ton of work to be done. So here's kind of like, I just want to give like a short, not necessarily a spiel, but like where I'm context to the way I think, and then pose a question. So I identify as a Black, non-binary, lesbian who's also disabled. And I also am an environmentalist. So I am very intersectional, and so much so that when I try to organize or protest for Black Lives Matter, sometimes I feel out of place in those spaces, and things like that. And so with the environmental movement, I've noticed that a lot of those spaces are mainly white. And I think that is very heartbreaking for me, especially because I feel like the Indigenous community needs to be the leaders of this movement, and or people of color that are most impacted by environmental racism. And like, I think the thing is, like, there needs to be a lot of education in the environmental realm of like people understanding, like, it's okay to use terms like racism. You can talk about racism and not be a racist. It doesn't, and some people are like very strict on like, I keep my religion and politics separate, and I want to keep the greenhouse gases out the air. That has nothing to do with politics. And that's debatable, but I guess in my experience, in my existence, like what is already existing, to Gabby's point, is very fragmented. Like you have places that aren't fragmented, like the ACLU, but they're really prioritizing what's the most important. And in our spaces, we know that environmentalism is such a dire issue, that we need to prioritize something that is inclusive and puts the environment first, right? And also our lives first. So I guess one of the things that I've noticed that's leading into my question is, one of the things that I've noticed is when it comes to organizing, one of the biggest backlashes that I've seen is like, people are like, you're on the street, you're organizing, you're protesting. The first thing people say is, get a job. They're like, why are you spending time in the street doing all this stuff? You could be working, get a job. Right. And then the other thing is too, depending on where you protest and how safe you are, you're at jeopardy of getting arrested, because you could, follow all the rules, right? And still somebody could decide to instigate a fight, etc. And so as somebody who is not necessarily an organizer, but an activist, you have to be prepared for that to happen. I talked to a lot of my friends that were organizing and mainly protesting in Detroit for the Black Lives Matter movement last year, and they were really shocked at the fact that we're peaceful protesting, and I got sent to jail. I got hit with a rubber bullet, and they're like, that's not okay. So I guess that leads into I just want to know what your thoughts are with regards to organizing, because I think there are a lot of good, well-intending people out there that could be involved in organizing and activism, but they are afraid for the simple fact that they feel like their job might be jeopardized if they find out you're participating in something that is activisty. And then the other thing is like, there's the danger of like, all right, well, you were protesting, you got put in jail, now you have a record. And some employers are like, no matter what, if you have a record, that's it. It doesn't matter what you had the record for. If you're peacefully protesting, the kidnapping of children, which I think nobody would oppose to. Some people are like, well, you were in jail, you were held in a facility that has other criminals, you're a criminal. So I just wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on that? I know I said a lot of different things, but I guess if I had to summarize it, I was like, you know, we really need to make intersectionality in the environmental movement a priority. And then we also need to talk about the elephant in the room of like why job security and like getting involved in the legal system is like, how can we remove those barriers so that more people can get involved?
Gabby, can I do that one?
Please do. I can chime in after.
Cool. Rhea, I heard most of what you're saying, but I got a call when you were talking, so I think I understood what you're asking. And from what I understand, first take note of what you were saying about the intersectionality, making environmental movement a priority. That's not what intersectionality is, right? Because also to what you're saying, if you boil it down to its most basic and fine parts, what we're talking about with, you mentioned racism, discrimination of all sorts, environmentalism, all the isms, it's not those individual things. It's not, you know, racism then creates this, that allows that. It's all of it is because of capitalism. And I might be, you know, Gabby might have something else to say or whatever. But like, so the environmentalism thing is just the like appetizer to the entree of unseating capitalism, right? The racism is the appetizer to unseating capitalism. The answer to your question, I think, is yeah, it's scary to go to jail, but that's what happens in what we currently have in this like iteration of capitalism. Is there are consequences to actions like that? So then it forces people either into complacency or extreme action. So that those are not ideal circumstances and ideal situations. But also, I don't know if y'all are fans of history, but like it's never been like a better time to be an activist, if you will, right? You know, like Stalin didn't put up with this shit. You know, Mao told, no disrespect to the professors on here, but like, you know, Mao told people during the Cultural Revolution to beat up their professors. Like, we don't do that here. It's never been a better time to be active, even though there are consequences and risks. The risks are much lower. And also the risks, if you're playing into the capitalism hand, are high for a lot of people. And that is a barrier that then forces people into complacency. But I'd say to that person that, you know, might be a friend of yours or something that's like, I would go to a protest, but I'm worried about getting arrested or shot with a rubber bullet. You say, I hear you and I agree with you. That is a high risk to take. So like Gabby said, what else can you do in the movement? Because we need more people to do more things all the time. Because again, there is a place for everybody. And I mean that sincerely because first, does everyone know who Eugene Debs is? I can't see anybody. Does someone say yes or no?
That was a no, I think, from some folks.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Eugene V. Debs. Okay. So from Terre Haute, Indiana, Eugene V. Debs was a five-time presidential candidate for the Democratic Socialist Party back in like 1996 to like 1924 or something. Forgive me for getting those dates wrong, but for 5 presidential elections, he ran for president. And one of the big things he talked about was creating a thing that would be Social Security for all people over the age of like 60. And everybody thought that was a wackadoo, crazy idea, but then all of a sudden, give it a dozen years and a Great Depression, and FDR somehow comes up with this great idea to create Social Security as part of the New Deal. So saying that to say that while Eugene Debs is not a memorable figure in this group, obviously, FDR and the New Deal is something we recognize, but that also FDR built those policies and interventions that help millions of people and are things that some of us on this call probably live off of to this day. He created a guaranteed income in 1935 based on Eugene V. Debs getting 5% of the vote in 1896 talking about it. So you are building a wave, you are building a movement, there is a space for you. And then the second part of the Eugene V. Debs story is, and Gabby probably knows this, and all you activists probably know this saying, but we are entitled to the struggles not the spoils. So then I'd ask you, Rayo, what is the why behind what you are doing, right? Is it truly to accomplish something you might never see, right? Are you going to plant the tree you'll never sit under the shade of?
Absolutely.
Because
I think
that's probably what it's going to be.
I mean,
Because,
that's, yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off. Please continue.
No, you're good. That was basically it.
I mean, I think during the pandemic, I really had like being intersectional in like I experienced depression. And so being a Black person experiencing depression and witnessing the Black Lives Matter movement from Michigan and living at home, I didn't have a job at the time. I was like, I am too fragile and vulnerable at this time to do anything. But the only thing I can do at this point is educate myself on the issues so that when I do have the time and the power to make a difference, I can. But I had so much empathy for high school students. Like I'm in graduate school, but I'm like, I couldn't imagine taking the ACTs during this unprecedented time. And like the pandemic's happening. And I was like, well, how can I make life better for them? And then not even them. Like I met someone who's a part of the Gen Z, and she was saying that her little brother was part of, Gen Alpha, right? And so who knows about the young kids that are wearing masks since they're age 5? Like, how does that color their world? How do they think about themselves? And like, will a lot of them have agoraphobia because their parents were like, stay inside? As a public health professional, I think about those things and the systems thinking that Dr. Raja E taught in class. So for me, the reason I do what I do is because I want to make a better future for all. And like, it's so hard for me though, because so many people that are especially Gen X and baby boomers, and even people in the silent generation, they did so much for my generation. But at the same time, when I try to talk to them about all the nuances of the things that I experience, they are like, not all, and I don't want to categorize all of them, but it just is like, they're like, no, you just need to focus on your career, focus on your job, stay in your lane. And like my answer to that is like, I can't stay in my lane. I can't pick and choose because I can't choose between my Blackness, my queerness, all of that. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, and Jane, I see your hands up, but I want to give Gabby a chance if you wanted to add something to the comment, and then we'll go back to Jane.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments, and I'll try to be brief. But I want to say to like sort of the worries around activism specifically, or I guess more higher risk activities to advocate for what we want in the world we want, is that the stakes are too high, like yes, there are risks, but there's also I feel like, and maybe this is what Charlie was alluding to in terms of it being like the best time to sort of be an activist right now, is that it feels like that urgency is being felt a lot more by a lot more people, and especially in this country, right? Like, we can talk about capitalism, but at the end of the day, it's also about colonialism and imperialism, right? Like the US is the big bad police of the world, and things that maybe we're feeling more people here are feeling. People have been feeling this around the world for a lot longer, and that's why we see much stronger environmental movements and more radical environmental movements across the world, because I feel like now it's kind of like we're feeling because of sort of the collapse of a lot of these different systems, these economic systems, here they've been protected through, centuries of colonialism, but like a lot of these things are falling apart. And I think the pandemic really helped to shed light on that. And so a lot more people sort of were forced to be attuned now. People who, for different kinds of privilege, were able to look the other way. Like, you can't no more. It's right there. It's in your face. It's everywhere. Right. And so I think that the stakes are too high to back out, now. And it's go time. It's time to do it. It's time to figure out where you fit in the fight and get in it. What I want to say about the example about Eugene is that Eugene didn't even before Eugene, right? There was like people in a similar setting like we are now who were like, yo, this is messed up, what can we do, right? Like, you know, small groups of people who take steps to try to make things happen. And so I think focusing on that, right? Like focusing less on who the people are or who the heroes are, but on the fact that like it's work, it's relationship building. These are things that like take time, right? And so I think, you know, nothing is going to happen overnight. I think in terms of what we've seen in the United States, at least, these like waves of resistance in the last, I don't know, like 50, 60 years, that's what they've been, right? They're waves. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe, you know, somebody will like tell me I'm super wrong, but the way that I've seen it, I was also in the streets doing a lot of work a couple summers ago with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it felt very different. Because I feel like every wave we're like bringing on more people, right? Every wave of sort of like this like larger increase of activism, more and more people are becoming conscientious of the intersectionalities of the fact that it's not just the one thing or the two things, that we can't, you know, that we are all of these things. We can be a Black, disabled, lesbian, you know, like all of the, and those are all, that's how we show up, right? But that also means that like, we can't fight in silos, right? And we have to like be in this fight together. And so that brings me to the last comment I wanted to make that you mentioned kind of early on, that I did want to address, which is the fact that the environmental movement is very white. And I think, especially just coming from MEJC, I do feel like I want to speak on it because it's been really a big part of our history and our making, right? And so folks who want to get involved in environmental work basically have very few options that are not, you know, these primarily like white organizations. And so, yeah, a lot of people get turned off by it, whether it's just because they don't see themselves in the work, they don't have connections to people who can, you know, bring them up, show them about this like ladder of engagement, or show that, you know, like, because all of this is like, organizing is relationship building, right? And if you're not in a position where you feel safe in building relationships with people, then like you're like automatically shut out. And so we see that also in just like how money is distributed for nonprofits, right? I think nonprofits like doing this type of work, whether it's environmental work or it's environmental justice work, it is super, super skewed in terms of like how funding is distributed. And, you know, go back to the root of it being capitalism and the fact that this is how these, you know, a lot of these like organizations are funded. And we can talk about all those things, but even in that space, right? Like in that sense, it is super unequal and unjust. And so like part of MEJC coming together was like, okay, we're all like these like small little organizations, but we want to have the same type of resources and have the same type of power that organizations like LCV or like, you know, Sierra Club or like these larger green organizations, like they have a bunch of people to do policy type of work, to do organizing type of work, to do, and like for us, it was always like, we're literally like, you know, making the signs in our backyard and, you know, scrunching together a few dollars to go buy what, and so that itself, right, is something that MEJC is interested in helping to shift. And I think we've been really, really, really successful at doing that in the last few years. We, you know, went from one staff when we started to like, we had 4 last year, now we're at 10, which is like, that's not necessarily how you measure success, right? But it does speak to some of the work that we've been doing. And it does feel like, you know, people are listening and people are hearing that like, yo, this is a problem. And here is like, we need to create a safe place for people of color to come together and fight for a better environment, a better earth, you know, and yeah, so I don't know. That's some of the work that we've been doing, some of the more behind the scenes, I guess, stuff, because, you know, we don't necessarily like harp on this. It's not, we're interested in moving forward, not necessarily in like blaming or, you know, judgment or anything like that. It's more just like, okay, this is an issue. How do we like fix it going forward? So yeah, I know.
Thank you. Thank you both. Jane, you had your hand up, so I'll turn to you.
Thank
you. Questions.
First, I want to tell Charlie, do not worry about offending anyone here. I don't know every single person on the call, but we're all on the same page with you, so don't worry about that. Unless you want to offend us, I don't know, you have to work harder than that. Secondly, one thing, if people are looking for ways to get involved, sometimes it's kind of a slow beginning. And I don't want to brag about my church. I do too much, but that's one reason I joined the Unitarian Church and I get to do work where for one of the things that we do is we give half of our plate collection to a nonprofit organization, and we specifically look for and have been encouraged to get involved with frontline communities. And actually MEJC is one of those that we're getting half of our plate. So it's kind of a baby step in, but it's a way to get that organization known to others. So I'm able to do the work to get that organization, promoted to my congregation and get donations, and all those little things help. And I guess the main thing I wanted to say was a couple of years ago, we had a webinar where the wonderful Shay Howell spoke for us, who's on this call. And I asked, what is the most important thing to do? And she said, do what's in front of you. I hate phone calling. I hate being in marches. I'm an introvert. Just pains me. So I have like 2 marches in me a year. That's it. That's all I can handle. But I'm great at doing other things. So do those things that I'm good at and that I am. You know, it's nice to get out of your comfort zone, but how many times will I really do that realistically? I could do a lot of work where I am comfortable and I am skilled. So I just wanted to say that. And I'd like to hear about ways people have gotten into the work from the beginning and where it led to them too.
Charlie, I don't know if you had something. Part of it's kind of a similar question. What I was going to ask you guys about is to hear stories from you guys about, where have you seen successes of like you've engaged in some of this work and it's worked, or what are the types of things that you encounter and like how do you manage that in terms of the frustrations?
Gabby, do you want to go first?
You can go ahead. I feel like
Okay.
I talked a lot.
We're all here for it. Well, I was excited about what Jane was saying because it allowed for like a callback to what Gabby's answer was about the how do you get involved. Part of the hopefully coherent rambling about capitalism I was saying is that if you think about it, again, looking through history, and I'm going to stop being super meta in a second, but if you look at history, every time there was like a structural shift in a society, it happened when the middle class started to be affected, right? That's also how elections work, right? If gas prices go up, why do you think Joe Biden is flooding the market with the strategic reserves of oil? Is because the midterms are coming up and he goes, crap, I'm going to lose everything. So once the middle class starts to get impacted, then everything starts to change. And I say that to say that then when speaking to people, and you made a good example there, Jane, that like going to your church, being at the UU church and talking to your community, you're meeting people where they are, and it's organic for you. So where is your place? Gabby said this, but just to be explicit about it, there's kind of 2 big ways that I've experienced it is you meet people where you are, where they are, which often is where you are when you're first starting out, right? So it doesn't have to be going into a club to try and talk to people about why capitalism is, why they feel like they have to go into super big debt to buy a Maserati, right? Like that, it doesn't have to be that inorganic. You can do it, it's really fun, but you don't get a lot of converts. But starting, right, that's building power, that's building your base, because you in and of yourself, whoever you are, wherever you're from, has a base to build and you have power. It just hasn't been given to you. So that's, that also kind of calls back to what Rayo was talking about, the like white environmental space is no one, it's a Frederick Douglass quote, right? Never in history has anyone in power ever willingly given up any of it, right? Like, so, why would that change now? So you can either kind of lean into it and be like, I'm going to show them, or you can start by building your own base of power, which it sounds like Gabby's doing with MEJC is, yeah, League of Conservation Voters, Sierra Club, you guys are cool, but we're going to do our thing for our people in our way and build our base with this group. So an example is from my life where things, to your question, Dr. Rajay, is that I started working on political campaigns, and I realized that I didn't have to work on, so I started working with like Gary Peters for US Senate, right? And so then there kind of comes this point where you can decide to either be like entranced by the fact that you're like at a fundraiser at the CEO of Bill Ford's house, right? And you're like, wow, this is really cool, because you're kind of leaning into where power already is, and you're helping Gary Peters get reelected. Or you can lean into, well, I want to work with people that are saying things that I can believe in, and the fact that I'm supporting a candidate that is doing something that I believe in more, that might be more of, I guess you could call it an underdog or an outsider. And so for me, I came to a decision point of like either come and do this Gary Peters thing, or I get to wear stuff like this and just like make nice with folks and talk about car dealerships and all that, or go this way and like talk with super progressive people that I do learn from, that I do grow from, that I do get challenged by, that I do feel like just the hours in a day that I have on this earth are better spent by being with these people than by like trying to fit in with this group. So having that decision point, it again, going back to capitalism, it's super hard to say, no, I don't want the well-paying job to hang out with the swells at the country club all the time in the suit to then just, go on the boat or whatever. But then, but that's the decision point you have to make. And so I think this also goes back to speaking of empathy, is when you do start building your base of power, whether it's with your people or in another group that you're not like organically aligned with or feeling comfortable within, meeting people where they are and having empathy is the only way, right? You can't point your finger in someone's face and tell them why they're wrong. Get them to change them. It's never worked, and it won't start. So I would say, personal example, deciding not to keep working for Gary Peters and working with super progressive people running for Congress, and us losing, 80 to 20 in a primary, but then realizing that when I went to the library in Kalamazoo for the town hall with the candidate or whatnot, the people, the three people that came up like to talk to us really believed and really learned and really grew than the like 1,000 hangers on that would come to a Gary Peters thing just to write a check and be close to power. So that I think is a pivotal decision I had to make, and I think a lot of people have to make it in their lives all the time. That's the other thing, right? Do you buy a used car or a new car? Do you live in a rich place or a not rich place? Do you think that rich and poor are somehow value judgments on people or not? Right? How do you deprogram yourself from learning from all those things that you've learned throughout your whole life, and then try and just improve yourself each day? And then when you come to that decision point, choose which way you go, and of course, give yourself enough grace on their journey. Hope that was
Is helpful. Gabby, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, I feel like there were two questions. There was like Jane's question and then the other question, and I'm not sure which one to go with, but I think because I had some thoughts on I think what Jane mentioned, but I think what I will focus on, since we are doing this next week for Earth Week, stories of some wins, I think I pulled that somewhere of stories of things that have worked. And that's actually what we're focusing on next week. So we, even though we are a bigger staff now, we've been going through some transitions, and we basically just like didn't have an event or anything really planned for Earth Day, and we're like, we should do something, we should say something. And so what we're doing as a way to feel like involved is sharing some videos. We're doing a video series with sharing some stories of some of the wins that we've had in environmental justice, either through some of the work we've done collectively with our partners, or some of the work that our partners themselves have been working on. And there's a lot to share. The ones that we're going to focus on are we have this new tool that just came out, the Michigan Environmental Justice Screening Tool. And that actually, it's still a lot of questions about it, as there are with a lot of government rollout programs. It could go south, but as of now, we're pretty hopeful. And it was really from work that MEJC started doing with the U of M, College of, I'm going to butcher their name, but one of their public health school. I don't know the name. But basically, like, from their research project, trying to figure out like, how could we do this? And at the time, it had been a few years that California had already had their EJ screening tool for decision making. Basically, it's like a way to like figure out a just way to distribute funds when they are available through the state coffers, right? Prioritizing monies to be spent, or projects and things like that. And so anyway, so that's a really exciting thing that has been years in the making, right? The project itself started about 6 years ago, and both through like their work, through our advocacy, a version of it has now been rolled out by Governor Whitmer, and so that's really exciting. There's also the incinerator in Detroit finally closed. That was like decades of work by people. Just recently we got news that there had been this like collapse of the river, into the river, of this like polluter. I forget what their actual industry is, but the river dock collapse, and they just kept being cited. They kept not figuring it out. They're finally leaving, but yes, the green sludge stuff in the river. They basically store a bunch of like raw materials on the Detroit River, and the whole dock collapsed, and like all of it went to the river. And the stone. Yeah, I lied. That was a different one. The green sludge was up in, I forget, somewhere in Metro Detroit. But anyway, both through like city ordinances that were passed, a lot of the community pressure, this polluter is just like going to clean up and move out, right? Like that took a lot of work from a lot of community, a lot of like rapid response, people who are in the area, who put the call out to people that they knew who might be able to do something. And folks were activated like super quickly to respond to it. Within our circles, the neighborhood groups, and anyway, so that's another win. So these stories, I feel like, because there is so much work, a lot of us that are in it, we sometimes forget to like talk about them and celebrate them as what they are, which are wins, right? And so the focus is going to be on sort of telling like the story of how that win, in our eyes, obviously, like took place, right? And all of it comes down to what I was saying earlier, which is organizing groups of people. It wasn't like one person. It wasn't the one legislator who introduced the ordinance over at city council, or it wasn't it's that sort of like group collective effort of how these things happen, right? And so we want to, it's a little bit different in different places, different municipalities, local stuff, state stuff, obviously like has a lot of different factors, but just telling some of those stories of like how some of these things have come to be, so that folks can sort of use those as examples, like, oh, okay, maybe I can't see myself in this story, but I can see myself playing a role in like maybe this part of a story in my neighborhood or in my community. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's,
Follow our pages and look out for our video series next week.
yeah, everyone should, because I mean, it really is, it's amazing when you think about the things that have happened, even in the past 5 years. I'm like, it's amazing. And a lot of that happens because not just MEJC, the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition, but you have like all these other organizations, and like they agitate enough and it works. And it's really, I don't know, these are the things that rekindle my hope of like, we can make change. So it's important to celebrate that.
Yeah, so our goal with it is that, you know, we didn't want to just do some like symbolic Earth Day thing where we like plant a tree or talk about recycling. Like Earth Day is about protecting the earth, and protecting the earth is also about fighting. And these are ways that we fought and that we've won. So it's kind of the message.
And then we keep fighting. So I'm curious, we have about just a little under 20 minutes left. And I would love to hear from you guys about, and other folks, if you want to throw in any questions specifically in the chat, or raise your hand, you can do that in a little bit. But like if you were to pick a specific issue, like environment related issue, that's, and I'm using that very broadly intentionally, right? Because this is kind of intersectional approach of environmentalism. Like what's an issue you can think of that people could get engaged on, particularly locally, Oakland County, or kind of in Michigan or Southeast Michigan, or in specific communities, and thinking of that issue, like what's a specific way that like you would encourage people to get involved? For Charlie, I think about like, is this like write to or talk to or go, like a commissioner or a council person? Like what are the ways that are like effective ways to get people as like, okay, I can try this, and then from there I can kind of expand and do this for other things?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Okay, so I think, right, because, okay, so framing, I hear what you're saying, I understand the framing, because for people to enter into the so-called ladder of engagement and understanding, you know, that the environment isn't just something that they should like, right, like Gabby was saying, like plant a tree on Earth Day, right? It's the same sort of mindset of like, well, there are hungry people in our community every day, not just when you go to the soup kitchen on Thanksgiving, right? So I appreciate that question. I think a good entrance point for people, especially in our community, in our county, would be rain gardens and bioswales, because that is something that people can do with a comparable minimal lift. It's something individuals have control over and that they can then kind of value signal that they're doing this. It's something that's not a huge like intervention it's not disruptive, and it's again thinking about how, because again change happens especially when middle class groups or people that are like the middle class get affected. This is something middle class people can do. I think rain gardens, and then that's the act, and that can be something individual or it can be something structural, right? There can be something like tax benefits on your property taxes if you have more, if you have more permeable space, or if you know, just thinking about people, yes, native plants especially, exactly right. So people being able, so there's the individual way that you can solve this by, again, the virtue signaling and doing a rain garden with native species, and that's something accessible and doable, and you should talk about it with everyone you know, and that's a way to then show and like level up as a community in terms of being conscious of the environment around you and the fact that it matters. But then second, from a structural political perspective, it's a good organizing tool, because you can then create, like, you know, talking about in Royal Oak, they're doing a pilot project of getting drones that take pictures of everyone's property, and then they use some sort of equation to then say, okay, your roof has this much square footage space, your driveway is this big, and your garage is this big, and your full plot, right? Your lot is 1,000 feet square, and your roof takes up 600 feet, your driveway takes up 200 square feet, your garage takes up 100 square feet. So all that in, your property tax are going to be this much because there's flooding. because there's sewage backups in people's basements. So this is also like an impacted community, right? This is a great intersection of getting middle-class people who have stuff that don't want their stuff to be flooded with their waste, that have had basements flood, that say, how do we fix that? You say, be an environmentalist. They say, how? You say, make a rain garden. And then policy-wise, get cities like your city, wherever you live, to copy what Royal Oak is piloting to do this tax assessment where you get a deduction on your taxes because you will cost the community less if you have more space that is green and can absorb water. That's one thing. And that's very accessible because at the city level, you probably have 5, 6, 7 city council members and a mayor. And so it's very acceptable for you to reach out to them and ask for a coffee. So if you've never had like a one-on-one conversation with your elected representative at a city level, you should change that immediately just for being a member of your community. And they should respond to you immediately because you're probably the only person that's reached out to them in a while. So you should, like, if nothing else, make sure you get on every council member in your community's like inbox, and then get coffee with as many of them as will respond, and then talk to them about this local intervention that's being done. At the county level, it's talking about what we can do with all this federal money we've got. So this is an amazing time to be in local government because, one, again, local government is supposed to be accessible. There's 21 county commissioners for 1.2 million people in Oakland County. In a town like, again, just to use the example, Royal Oak, there's 50,000 people and 7 city council members and the mayor. So like these people, again, you see them walking their dog, you see them on Facebook, like you can touch these people and reach out, right? Your congressperson, the governor, that's inaccessible for a lot of people in a lot of ways. But local people are extremely accessible and should be, so you should demand that. The county, though, speaking to the great timing, the county has like $180 million from the federal government that we have yet to figure out what to do with. And we have to figure out what to do with it by December 31st, 2024. This is called the American Rescue Plan, right? ARPA. And Oakland County is just sitting on this money trying to figure out what we should do. And we don't know yet. So if you have suggestions, one, reach out to me. But two, thank you, Jane, look up your county commissioner and again, reach out to them, call, text, email, and get on their calendar and start talking. And also this is the other thing, just people being people, listening goes a long way too.
Thanks so much. And I was reminded too of, I live in Ferndale and, 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't plant a bunch of native plants or a rain garden in your yard, in the front yard. It was against the ordinances. And a group of a very small number of residents got together and they changed the ordinance. And now it's encouraged and there's lots of people planting that. So like, really, it's just you and a few of your neighbors and you could change an ordinance in your city to make that possible. So there's like small things you can actually change. So, Gabby, if there's anything before you have to go. Oh, that wasn't you. Okay, good. Gabby, go ahead.
Oh, I just commented that yes, let's kill the American lawn. Because yeah, all of those ordinances in places really upset me. Where like, you have to, your grass can't be like so long and it has to be like, anyway. I feel like there's a lot that can be done. I'm going to definitely be selfish and pitch our upcoming DTE campaign. They have applied for, oh, that's my puppy. They've applied for a rate increase with the MPSC, the commission, the public commission that rules over whether our utilities can or can't do that. They've actually been applied and been denied the last couple of years, mostly due to the pandemic, but we're definitely anticipating that they will be more open to granting it. And so we really don't think that's right, especially for poor folks in all of the area, the service area for DTE with the pandemic. Folks have been hit economically in so many different ways. And the last thing we need is this for-profit utility company to make more money off of the backs of poor people. Mostly the affected people will be, poor people of color. And so we're going to go pretty strong on that. DTE services a lot of different communities in the state, especially in Southeast Michigan. And so I know it's something that affects everyone, or a lot of people probably on this call. But I would definitely encourage y'all to follow our pages, our website, and our social media. I'll definitely share when I have more information. We have in terms of more details, but we have an upcoming rally to sort of like voice our opposition to that. It would be great to have people there, to just have people, share messaging. I'm sure there will be a petition. We will try the best that we can to get DTE to back away from it. They've also been, on this like weird assault against like solar power, but then at the same time pretending like they really are for it and care about it and having community meetings. I don't know. So there's like a lot of stuff around our utility companies. But especially in this case, we're focusing on DTE. So I would definitely say that. I do like this idea of using like, rain gardens and things like that as like a way in, right? As like the door maybe for a lot of people who aren't as engaged or who won't necessarily be as engaged with something more, I don't want to say combative, but more in your face or the face of the politicians or the powers that be, right? People who might be a little bit more intimidated, but you can get folks to start talking about it through things like a native plant or a rain garden, because everyone's been affected or knows somebody who's affected by the flooding. And it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to keep happening. So
yeah, I really appreciate that. And the Michigan Public Service Commission, the MSPC, is the members are appointed by the governor, and I don't remember, like, the membership makeup is also slightly problematic. I don't remember the exact breakdown of like industry representatives versus other folks. So even getting involved around trying to influence who is a member is important. So I'll just say a plug on that.
Gabby, do you have a date for the DTE rally?
Yes, it's going to be April 27th, 5:30 in Highland Park. I don't have like it's not, you're probably like the first group of people hearing this. This just came out of the working group. We don't have like a Facebook event or flyer or anything yet, but it'll be April 27th at 5:30 in one of the community partner spaces that we have in Highland Park, which is a couple. So I will share that as soon as I have the actual address and more details.
Thank you.
And if you follow the MAJC, sign up for a newsletter, you'll probably get that info. So I encourage you to do that. I'll also throw out there, I know that there's transit issues at play right now in Oakland County, opting out. So there's a lot of stuff happening where you can get involved on environment related stuff in the area. But we only have about 5 minutes left. So I want to leave a little bit of time here to see if there's other final points either Gabby or Charlie has, or if anyone else has a quick point. All right, Rhea, if you have something quickly, and then we can let Gabby and Charlie say something.
Sure. I'm graduating April 28th, and I want to leverage that the visual power of the fact that I have a master's degree and have all these intersections. And so I was wondering, is there a way that we can organize or do something? Like, I know there's a climate change rally, but I know that even if the climate change rally is large, it's just going to be like one point in time that people can choose to ignore. So I was wondering if y'all are interested in like trying to organize something with me. I'm not sure of like the logistics of everything right now, but like if y'all have any ideas, I would like to organize something.
I'll recommend you also connect with Jane and Sierra Club for the Turn Oakland County Green. That's one thing. And there's also the Sunrise Movement. So there's different groups to tap into who are doing that work. And that's that synergy we want.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Charlie and Gabby, do you guys have final thoughts or any other comments related suggestions for Rhea? Gabby?
Yeah, so right along those lines, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be super self-serving here and pitch our membership drive because we are definitely looking for more folks to get involved. As I mentioned before, we've been primarily like a coalition table of different groups, but we are working because of the work capacity that we have been expanding. We definitely like run into folks who like want to be involved and like don't know how, right? And so that we're trying to create that space now where we definitely do have our coalition partners who are the heart of the organization, but also like individual members who want to like get in on the work, right? Like there's work to be done. How do we do it? How do we open the door for people? And so we do, we are this next 6 months on this membership drive, trying to get folks to sign up, but also to start getting involved. We have a lot of different committees and work groups working on different things, both at localized levels, like what I was talking about with like the DTE campaign, but also at the state level and even with federal policy. We were super involved last year with our legislators with Build Back Better law that died. But even just like being a part of those conversations and having those conversations with politicians around the false solutions when it comes to like climate change, around all these different issues. So I would definitely encourage you to think about getting involved with MEJC. As somebody just posted the link to the website, you can go on there to figure out how to sign up. I can also send you all like our application, and I have like a little membership 411 and like what it means to get involved in the work. But we also specifically, I want to share with you, we have a movement school that we've started. And so that's part of that education piece where we are trying to get, folks who like already kind of like, all right, I know how that I want to be involved, not sure how. And so we have 3 cohorts of it. The first one just started a couple weeks ago. So there's definitely still time to apply. If you go to the website, that's one of the main tabs actually, I think right now for our movement school. So you can apply. There's going to be 2 more cohorts. And part of it is also for folks like Rhea, you're saying that you want to do something and you want to do it, like this might be a good place to like to do that with folks who are similarly positioned and wanting to figure out projects to work on or to support if they're already taking place.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And I just have a couple of quick things to say. One, you all are the best example of how you can build power, because there are 16 of you on this call that are doing this, and this didn't have to happen today, but it is. So, that's, again, this is what power building and base building, power mapping looks like. So you're doing it. So keep doing it and keep trying to get better, because we're all works in progress. There was like some 12-year-old or something wrote at a park on the sidewalk chalk by my house during the pandemic that said, everyone's just doing the best they can right now. So I think that's also important to remember, because especially as fellow activists, it's so easy to be like, why don't you just get it? Everyone's doing the best they can right now. Like, go with grace, keep trying to get better, and it's all capitalism's fault. So,
Great parting thoughts there, because it is easy to lose hope, but it is important to have grace for yourself and others. So thank you. I wanted to say thank you to both of you, Gabby and Charlie, for taking your time to be here and share your thoughts and experiences with us. It's just really meaningful to be able to do this. So thank you so much.